podcast is changed. I can feel it in the audio. I can feel it in the editing. I can feel it in the air. Much of what was traditional roguelikes is lost, for none now live who remember them. Happy Groggentines Day, everyone! Hooray! This week, this episode, you are joining us on a very nice way to spend the time with your significant other by listening to a video game podcast where people talk about roguelike video games of all tastes and flavors and fillings and whatever kind of message that you get on the candy. I am your master of both the podcast and of Dredfell Tower, Scott Berger, and adventuring across this fabled fantasy continent, plotting my doom, are my podcast co-hosts.
Hello, it's Colin, and my horde of monsters that I have summoned to my bidding to defeat my enemies.
And this is Will. This is the extra life that enemies have. That's the essence of what I am here. That you think you've got them beat, but nope, they were just at half health all along.
And lastly, it's Eidolon Andrew, Corrections Corner. I'm sorry, Nightmare Reaper. The Sprite update actually came out in 2020. It didn't come out last year. Harshman.
Housekeeping out of the way. All right.
Indeed. Well, this episode, we're casting all of the charm spells we can muster this week with talking about a biggie. It's Tales of Maj'Eyal. Probably it's our newest, oldest game. I think the oldest game that we've covered up to this point was 2011, possibly FTL. I think was maybe the oldest game that we talked about thus far. Maybe Binding of Isaac. I think maybe those were on par with each other. But Tales of Maj'Eyal, TOME, came out originally. Well, I guess to be clear, we're talking TOME 4 this time. This game has kind of had a long grandfatherly history, coming out originally as Tales of Middle-earth back in October 24th, 1998, and iterating along the way until we have what we now recognize as TOME 4, what we're playing today, which canonically I'm going to use the May 11th, 2010 release date for it because it did predate its Steam release by a little bit. But if you go on Steam, you can see it was released on Steam a little bit later, December 31st, 2012, but we're going with the 2010 date. This is a PC game. Let's to be clear, this is a game that you can find for free on the te4.org website, where donations are happily accepted, along with some paid DLCs. And you can find it on Steam pretty routinely anywhere between like $7 not on sale and like I think $2 or less than that when it does go on sale very frequently. And you can find all the DLCs on there as well. This is a solo dev with open source support effort by Nicolas Casalini, a French dev that people might know better on the interwebs by his internet moniker Dark God. And this is a very engaging game for people that it resonates with. This is a game where you're this is my new interjected stat segment because people love numbers so much. What's my quote here? Your average player of this game has about 129 hours in it. And our last little bit of numbers trivia here, this clocks in as our number 167th most popular roguelike that we have, with 4,773 total Steam reviews. Colin, your mission escort is about to jump headfirst into a pack of wolves. What one-sentence description do you give them of TOME before they are sent to the Eidolon Plain?
You're in for a treat, playing a truly traditional roguelike game. It ticks all the boxes, and it's pretty fun to boot.
We have not
go to your death. Go to your death, minion.
Despite being titled a roguelike podcast, I think we span the broad spectrum of what's included in that category. But for purists, for traditionalists who adhere to the strict dogma of the religious texts, we haven't really talked about many traditional roguelikes on this program. We've talked everyone's favorite hack/loot. We've talked Cataclysm, Dark Days Ahead, Sword of the Stars, The Pit, Dungeons of Dreadmore, Shattered Pixel Dungeon, and Cogmind. And I think this is kind of those. Let's see, Dungeons of Dreadmore, Shattered Pixel Dungeon, I guess Cataclysm. I don't know. We kind of dunked on Cataclysm a lot. But all those and Cogmind are kind of well, okay, maybe not Dreadmore, but the rest of them are like new wave traditional roguelikes. This Tales of Maj'Eyal, I think, was the last hurrah of the original pre-Steam era traditional roguelike games. And yeah, has a very long and storied history. I've got a whole bunch of factoids here ready to go. But I'm curious about people's first impressions of this game because it's been a little while since we've played said traditional roguelike. Andrew, you have not had the opportunity to play a traditional roguelike on this program yet. You've been spared up until this point. I'm curious, around the horn, okay, so the first thing that when people are going to be frantically Googling this game, when they come to it, they'll most likely come to the Steam page and they'll see the art for this game and the trailer that showcases said art for this game. Do we want to go around the horn with art impressions to kick off, or do we want to save that for later?
Oh, I'm okay. I mean, this is going to be a lot of just talking about the negative aspects of it from my point of view. So wherever you want to start is fine by me. The art, I don't know, Andrew, did you want to take it? I know you felt a lot more strongly about this than I did, but
I think we should maybe save the art discussion for maybe mid-episode. But I do like the idea of going around the horn very briefly and giving a 1 or 2 sentence review of an overview of our experience. So I had a very busy gaming week. I was painting up a storm. I was dice rolling up a storm. I was able to cram at the last minute, and I got just under 6 hours into this game, which let's keep in mind that the average AAA shooter is probably less than 6 hours long. 6 hours is a pretty decent chunk of, lest I come off a little too defensive. But anyway, I played for about 6 hours. The furthest I got was like level 7 or something. I did not finish on none of my runs did I finish past the first quest. And I would say that for those 6 hours, I think I was able to grok the appeal, but I can tell you those were a pretty neutral to bad 6 hours of gaming for me, is my quick overview. But the rest of you had a very different experience in terms of the amount of time you played and your levels of enjoyment, varying levels of enjoyment.
Yeah, for me, I had put about 20 hours into this game a couple years ago. So I had kind of a preview as to what this game was about. At the time, despite putting 20 hours into it, never really got very far, never really understood what I was doing, never really grokked the immense depth that there is to this game. And was always just kind of like, yeah, I don't know. People really like it, but I'm not sure why. But this time around, because we've been forced to play it for the podcast by my choosing, I think I've come around to it quite a lot. Because since then, we have played some other traditional roguelike games. I've put 100 hours into Cogmind since then, and then coming back to Tome, I was like, okay, yeah, I think I get it now. And I think like it's kind of opened my brain up to similar games like this that we'll talk about later, where before I was like, I don't have any idea how people could find this fun or interesting. And now I'm like, okay, I think I can get it. I'm sure that those games that we'll talk about later are not quite for me, but this feels like a last harumph and hurrah of like your very like hobbyist level tinkering PC gaming, where you're going in and you're like, oh yeah, I want to like change up the mod or like .ini files and like really go in and start ripping it apart and putting my own like flair on it. It feels very, very mod-y and tinkery from that perspective. And even just like all the crazy amount of stuff that's in it. Every time that I come back to this, I'm like, I want to experiment with this thing next. And that's always been a refreshing experience.
well, yeah, no, I think I out of all the 4 of us, somehow I can't believe I looked at the Steam
Somehow,
hours.
how could it possibly
Somehow
be?
it
You
got
played
up to
most of a
60
video game.
60 hours, 60 in the span of 2 weeks. I work really hard, as you can tell. My day job. I didn't enjoy it. That's the funny thing here. Is like I was just torturing myself because I wanted to fucking beat the game, and it was just today that I finally got that W. And I tell you what, yeah, it's not worth it. Don't do it, folks.
Scared straight.
Yeah, no, like okay, the in a nutshell, the problem is that it's a roguelike game.
Traditional roguelike.
If you want to dress it up with other words, you can, but like the nature of this kind of game is just bad overall. And the core reason, and I've done a lot of thinking about this, and I think the core reason is that you don't know what the enemy is going to do. If you have 3 or 4 enemies on the screen, you're on there, you're in the dungeon, you're in the hallway, or wherever you are, you don't know what the enemy is going to do. Of course, over time, you get more familiarized with that kind of thing. But like ultimately, the only way to really know is to, hover over them, inspect the character, look at all of their talents, look at and then mouse over every single talent, see what the range of that talent is, see what the cooldown is, and only by taking careful logs of like exactly when they use certain talents and how the cycle, like can like when it's good to do certain things. And so basically at the end of the day, you just end up memorizing an algorithm of like use these talents in this order, change it up if there's a spellcaster or if there's something with high health, and just do that over and over and over and over again. And all the fun, if there is fun, is in the first 25 levels where your build is actually changing rapidly. You're getting new things, you're unlocking things, you're becoming this powerful thing. And then it's just 25 more levels of, okay, here's another kind of somewhat useless talent point. And okay, here's another like mildly better piece of equipment. Okay. And terrible plots.
Whoa, hang on.
Plot,
no,
terrible art.
No, well...
What about
UI is terrible. I mean, there's just so many things about this game that
the UI, golly.
The music, of course, I turned off right away, as I do always. But the music is actually bad for this, right?
No.
Okay, well,
no.
I also turned it off. It should be noted.
But the rockin' arena tunes, though. I mean,
the arena tunes. I'm gonna have to give it a listen right now. You say terrible story. Yes, please, Colin. I'm curious. You might be in the middle here between these two experiences.
I mean, I mostly liked playing the game, so therefore I'm in the middle. I think there's a lot. I agree with the UI being an issue. I do not care about the graphics at all. I think that they did fine to get across what was happening. But I wish that it was a better system to like display information. Getting like to Will's point, like of getting the stuff out, like figuring out what the enemy what abilities they had to do. You were a little overwhelmed with what everything did and what everything had, and like the amount of work it took to get that knowledge into your brain if you didn't already have it just memorized. But like on the other hand, like it was kind of interesting, like every single thing that you fought had talents and abilities and stuff that you yourself could also have. Like I did kind of like, it's definitely a philosophical debate of like, should the enemies be doing things that you can do or not? Is it and like I like that they had a pretty strong stance on that of like, yeah, like I fought some like big old orc baddie when I was a berserker in the first run that I did, and he was also a berserker. I'm like, we've like almost the same build, and it was kind of fun that it wasn't just like, oh, this is a monster with its own stuff. It's like, oh no, I'm going into his tree. It's like, he has that thing. I also have that thing. So like, oh, I know exactly what. Oh, I need to run away because he's going to be able to rush me like I would normally rush him, and he absolutely whomped me, and I need to get away. So it was like kind of. I thought it was interesting that like you could go in and you could see every one of their abilities was an ability that you could find in some tree of some character. Maybe not one that I hadn't unlocked yet, but it existed somewhere. And yeah, like it was, it I do think you need to spend a fair amount of time playing it in order to like really grok all the systems, because there are a lot of systems that are interacting with each other, and it's not the most intuitive. Like it doesn't do a really good job of explaining how everything works. Like you can find out on the wiki, but the further we go into the podcast, the more I am like, it should be in the game. You should be able to find stuff in the game and not have to go to the wiki. We're going to go to the wiki to find out exactly what the formula is. Anyway. But like, you shouldn't be required to. So yeah. But I think the actual gameplay loop was pretty rewarding. Especially, I mean, so I never got past, I think the highest character I got was like 28. So maybe I haven't hit those levels that Will was talking about where you're really grinding through. But I mean, I put 20 hours into it and I still had an enjoyable time going through those first 25 levels and like figuring out how to synergize stuff and how these things like, oh, I'm going to only do summoning things, and to figure out how to like have all of these synergize together. And yeah, it was a fun puzzle.
You raise an interesting point, or you point out an interesting feature of this game, which I, in the 6 hours, did not realize, that everything in the game, every creature that exists in the game is beholden to the same sort of rules and has access to the same systems. That is interesting. I'm not exactly sure how to sort of summarize how that's interesting, but I don't know. It's cool that there is a sense of mechanical cohesion across the entire game world. That and the scenario you're describing with the barbarian versus barbarian rage off sounds pretty cool. I can dig it.
Well,
Yeah.
I think
and then I ran away. I ran away and I leveled up, and then I came back and I absolutely murdered him.
Yeah.
this is one thing that I think Tome kind of excels at once you start opening up things via unlocks, is the diversity with its craziness. And it doesn't do it, like, one of my bones to pick with this is that it doesn't do it fast enough. But again, if this game has been out for so long that if there's a thing that you can think of that you would change about this game, there's probably a mod for it that does that. And for me, like, having the unlock all of the available races to pick from and all of the available classes just to experiment with and see like what's all different in here was very interesting, because the first time that I played through it, this game does have a tutorial mode, and on this podcast we like to shout out when games do tutorial modes. But oh man, like, I don't know, this, like, the tutorial for this game just felt so boring. Like, it does its job. It's like, click here to do this. This is an enemy. You will bump into them to attack them. This is how you click a thing from your Diablo style skill menu to kill them and stuff. It does all that stuff fine, but I don't think it's presented maybe too safely, and it doesn't show you the vast diversity of craziness that goes on in this game. Like, I think when you first boot it up, you have access to, like, your basic warrior classes, your basic archer classes. I think you get the rogue by default. I can't remember, but
Yeah.
But you get like the archmage class, I think, by default. No,
Alchemist.
But well, I think you unlock the archmage pretty fast. I think
Yes.
it's probably one of the first unlocks. And the starting like mission for the other classes are kind of all, or is it race based? Now I'm getting confused. Anyway, let's start with how your story begins in this game. Depending on what race or class you pick, you can either have maybe the most boring vanilla intro to a fantasy game you've ever played, or you are starting in outer space, jumping from asteroid to asteroid with the Earth in the background, and you are zapping monsters to their doom to save the celestial plane as your first mission. And that's kind of this game in a nutshell. Is like, it can present itself at first as maybe like the most mid vanilla boring looking palette you've ever seen, but just under the surface of that is like this like party snake style surprise of insanity that I don't know if anyone else has had like the different starts to experiment with. But I went with my play experience, I went very wide instead of deep. Like Will, I was trying to experiment with as many little systems as I could. And each one of those different starting styles was very neat to me. You don't see that very often, especially with something like an open world experience like this. But Colin, you played a dwarf character, right?
I did, yeah. You start in a completely different spot. You start
Yeah.
in like deep in the underground, fighting your way out from something, and then your second, like, I don't think you can go to those. You can't go to the dwarf city unless you start as a dwarf. It's like not. It's like it gives you some weird text about like you need something to breathe here or something. It's just like some like you're not allowed to be in this spot. But yeah, I mean, that was my first character too. So I was like, oh, I just kind of assumed that everyone had like a cool, weird underground plot related mission start. And then like my second characters were the like most vanilla human, John Deere, the summoner, summoning all of his deer friends. And the human or halfling start is just like, you're in the woods, no plot, nothing really, just like go fight some stuff.
Time to go on an
There's a troll
adventure.
at the end. Yeah.
Yeah, you're inspired. It says you're inspired by like the tales of old and like glory and gold and all that stuff to go out to the wilds and find some of that adventure for yourself. And if you're a human or a halfling, I believe,
Yeah.
you go into the forest and your first quest is to
To kill the
find and
troll.
defeat a troll, which the exact troll that you fight is randomized. Sometimes you will fight Bill, the stone troll, or you will fight one of his friends whose name I forget. And that's I appreciated that there was a little bit of variety, but I will agree that is not a super exciting start. Furthermore, navigating through the first two levels of that the first two screens of that forest and having to replay it, which you will be doing because it is a roguelike with permadeath. Neat permadeath mechanics. We'll get to that, I'm sure. But you are re-rolling a lot, at least in my situation. And you're having to replay this godforsaken, horrible to navigate screen because you have 8 directions of movement. It's grid-based movement, of course. 8 directions, and the need to move diagonal and press W and D at the same time, or W and A, or what have you, to both move in between like trees that are set out on a grid. Moving diagonally and attacking diagonally is a nightmare, basically.
Andrew, people are screaming in their cars right now saying, "You're supposed to be using the keypad to move. What are you doing?"
Oh, interesting.
My keyboard doesn't
Yes,
even
but
have
isn't weight set to number 5 on the keypad by default?
Yeah, because you're moving like down on your position.
Lord,
I guess. But in Colin's case, this is one thing that always kind of bugs me is like,
well, then why did they bother? Why did they bother
well,
mapping WASD? Of course, I'm playing a PC game. Whatever. All right. Yes,
right. Well,
I wasn't in the right traditional roguelike
Well,
headspace.
everyone knows the only key you need is Z, auto explore.
That's correct. That's the correct answer.
I was about to get to that. Just auto explore, incredible. Let's have auto explore in every game, is what I'm saying. It would have definitely helped me when I was playing some old like fan made ASCII graphics roguelikes. Great stuff. Auto explore just takes you to the next point of interest. Your character runs around the grid, and you stop on loot or monsters, and then you
don't even stop on loot. He just
interact
picks
with
it up and just keeps running.
He picks it up. I don't know if I had
Did
the
you ever
auto
get
pickup set up.
transmogrification chest.
I was supposed to be using the numpad. I was supposed to be using my
Wait, Andrew,
separate
did you ever get the transmog
USB.
chest?
I think you start with that, don't you?
Oh, I got it. I never
Okay.
used it. I was like, I don't understand what this does. I can store stuff in it, but I need to also save stuff out of it. I
It
don't.
just auto sells everything for you.
Oh, okay. How do I? That's neat. That's cool. That's handy. It's kind of like Torchlight, or it's like
because
your
at the end
Animal
of
World set stuff out.
at the end of every stage, so each dungeon that you go in typically has like about 3-ish levels or stages to it, and at the end of each one of these levels you go up and down a stair, or you go to the next part of the forest or something, and the loot that you've picked up, your transmog chest will pop up saying, all right, this is the stuff that you picked up, it's highlighted, what do you want to keep? And 99% of it is junk, and you're just like, yeah, just auto sell it, which solves maybe one of the biggest gripes I have about Diablo and other action RPG games is like, yeah, I picked up all this loot. I gotta teleport back to town. I gotta go find the vendor. I gotta go like sell all the stuff to the vendor.
You
Okay,
gotta
now
go
I've got my
find,
gold.
yeah.
Now I gotta go back in the battlefield, and then it just like bam, it just streamlines that process, like it or it shortcuts it. Well, maybe not perfectly, but I like the idea of that a whole lot.
That is neat, and I've seen experimented with, and good on you. There are definitely good design ideas here. I think that the designers are very talented, and I think this is certainly an achievement of game design. It's not necessarily my cup of tea. Basically, interesting numpad. I was supposed to be using numpad.
It reminds me a lot of like
that would have solved a lot of my problems.
There's a lot of like traditional roguelikes that go out of their way to not use the mouse for some godforsaken reason, because it's like the classic meme of like back-end coding developers creating a website, and it's this Spartan mess of just like awful UI decisions, and like that's kind of what you roll the dice with a lot of traditional roguelike games, is stuff like that. It's very much, you could tell a programmer made the thing. It reminds me a lot of like if you're playing the original Quake, and you know how like the original Quake had like the directional button movement instead of like mouse movement and WASD. Like,
right, sure.
By the way, there's this whole other peripheral that people use now. But I will say that like Tome plays very well with a mouse. Like you could play the whole game with just a mouse, and it's a very welcome design experience compared
you could,
to some...
but it's so slow. I mean, I appreciate that they included the mouse interface. I think in terms of controls, it's great that they gave you all the different options, including digging through the closet and getting my USB numpad attachment. No, that's not true. I have a full length keyboard, so I should have realized. I guess the tutorial even says, "Hey, use the keypad." It says,
but if you're someone like Colin who builds their own
keyboard,
keyboard,
in the
I honestly had no trouble clicking both W and D at the same time.
Well, I'm glad I found it to be kind of tedious to have to do that motion over and over again. So that's why I was happy that the auto explore option was there, so I could just spam that.
Yeah, auto explore is truly I feel like it takes away something from the game very slightly, but it gives back so much more in the like lack of friction to go through things.
Certainly. It's not as if I think the way that generally most people are going to play it, or at least the way I played it, is that you use the auto explorer when it behooves you, and then move around normally.
Yeah.
With WASD or whatever.
I imagine
whatever you have available to you.
I imagine too that there are certain character classes that it is better or worse for, depending on how you interact with ranged enemies. So like if you're a glass cannon that's going to get sniped by something, and you need to be like carefully going around corners or whatever, it might be different than when I was playing Odom, the dwarf berserker, and my goal was like, I don't care that something sees me, I'm going to rush towards it and then deal with it by just smashing it into bits. Like, I don't need subtlety here. Auto explorer is my best friend.
There is the feature of track, which is interesting. I think it's possible that at higher levels, you have to just basically sit there until the skill refreshes and take dungeons and areas very slowly and just hit the track button, which basically lets you see where all the enemies are around you for a period of time. And so like in a certain radius. And so if you know that like, oh, there's a bunch of, if I was to approach this from this angle via like auto explore, I would be running into like 3 elites at once. But if I come from this angle, I can like lure one away from the rest of them. And so that's kind of the advantage, I think, of taking it slow and not using auto explore. Of course, I, as an archmage with a shield, which was extremely overpowered by mid game and especially through the end. No, you just hit Z, and then you don't have to move at all. You just walk into a room, you stare at them, and you just shoot lightning bolts at everything, and then they all die. And if they run up to you and start smashing your shield, you're just like, what? I got 6,000 more HP on this shield. You want to keep bashing it? All right, that's fine. Unlimited power.
So I'm curious, like, when I knew that this game was almost doomed for Will to be playing it, because I knew he was gonna open it up for 5 minutes and say, this game looks like shit, I hate how it plays, and then just like close it after playing it for 20 minutes. So I considered it a moral victory in that he played it for longer than 20 minutes.
I should have done that.
but there was something here that kept you engaged and interested to actually like I haven't beaten this game. I haven't even beaten Dredfell Tower yet, which I guess is what kind of like the midpoint. Like I'm curious what kind of like kept you motivated to either like were you always re-rolling the same character of like okay I now I know how to do that better, or did you try something different every time?
I think I had like 5 characters overall, and I
Five
don't remember,
character archetypes or like 5
like
total
just 5
runs?
characters in total. Yeah, 5 runs in total. And I did the ranger twice. I did some kind of warrior starting out, I think. No, I did the
And you were doing
alchemist.
it mostly on the mode that wasn't like true roguelike, where you had like
Playing with lives.
so there's
You
we
get
should
like
explain.
5
There's
lives. I
yeah,
think.
there's more than one game mode. There's like a couple difficulties, and there's the true roguelike, Iron Man, permadeath, etc. And then there's one that's like a kind of a soft permadeath where you start off with 1 life, but then you gain lives at certain level milestones. Um, which I think is probably a better way to play starting off. Because I played it, I played the true Iron Man mode once and then died in a way that I was like really frustrated by. It was like, oh, I made a mistake in how I thought an item worked, and then I accidentally clicked and I moved instead of doing anything for my turn and died. And it was like, oh, that felt super bad.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but
Because you've been
uh,
at that point you had invested like how many hours into that character?
like 5.
Yeah.
Which
Yikes.
yeah. But anyway, sorry, Will,
Yeah, the
you were
permadeath.
doing
I'm
you
looking at
did
the screen here.
normal mode, right? With the multi lives.
Yeah, the default setting.
Adventurer mode.
I think I
Uh,
used in total on the run that I won, I used 5 lives, I think. I was down to my last life, and then eventually I got some item that gives you another life that I didn't end up using. But it was I definitely made a bunch of dumb mistakes as I went through, and I can see why. Yeah, like having those extra lives when you're learning that, like, oh yeah, when you
yeah.
have an item in your hotbar and you replace that item on your kit, you still have that item on the hotbar, and when you click it and you're expecting to use it, oh, it turns out you're going to use a full turn to switch your gear, and you're going to get absolutely smashed. If that was like, oh yeah, this is my last ditch shield that's from this like shield trinket. Nope, turns out you're dead instead. That's the kind of thing that that's just a bad UI decision, I think, because
Yeah. That's assuming you can find that part of the action bar anywhere on your screen, depending on what resolution you're set at. But we'll get to the UI in a moment. Your question, Scott, I don't know if we've gotten a specific answer just yet, or I wasn't paying attention because I was opening and looking at the game's new game options. Will, what kept you coming back for 60 hours? Was it just raw determination to conquer this challenge?
I think it's just I didn't have anything better to do. It's like, I mean, I have a bunch of games that are better, but they're like better for like a certain context, which is like to say Slay the Spire, because I have to mention that every episode. That's as I'm going to bed, I'll play around essentially, and it's like great, but like it's not something I'm gonna play like for a long period of time. And this has still had some novelty value in it, I think, of like, ooh, what's gonna happen next? And oh my god, that I died to that stupid the master vampire in Dredfell, that kind of big midway point. I'm like, oh, I really want to beat him. And so that's something about that got me to grind through and just deal with the suck of getting to him again. But I probably in hindsight, I probably should just picked up a different game or just done something productive with my life. That would have been probably a good decision.
So here's a question.
Yes.
Here's a question for the group. Is this game better for someone who is just coming into this game for the first time? Is this game better to play on the easiest possible difficulty with no permadeath? Like unlimited lives, easiest possible mode. Is that a better experience, do we think?
I think
You're referring to the
difficulty-
exploration mode.
I think regular difficulty is fine, but
Yeah.
playing with multiple lives is definitely something I would advise for a new player coming in.
What about
Like-
infinite lives?
No, that's bad.
Because one thing that like befuddles me about Tome in particular is its length. And I think there's an interesting kind of bifurcation that's happening between these more RPG end of the spectrum traditional roguelike games where you're investing hours and hours and hours into this character, this build, and this run that you have going. And you could die in any second from this enemy that'll just warp in from the beyond the screen, and bam, you're dead. Versus the other option of something that I think kind of fits the mold for your permadeath grid-based old school roguelikes better, coffee break roguelikes. And these are games that are designed to be played basically end to end in 30 minutes to an hour instead of like one run taking 6 to 10 hours, we'll say. And
20
very
hours to
much
beat it.
like, yeah. And, there's, I guess also the question of meta progression and unlocks, but anyway, like is this idea of RPG long-term investment in a character that can be perma-killed antithetical to that? Like, are these two different genres that are clashing together?
Yes, absolutely. That's the answer. Roguelikes should be at most 2 hours. I think that, and this is something that it didn't surprise me. You said this is an old game, because that's something that's been learned in the past decade, is that you make a Hades style game. You make it, there's a tight window of just like, all right, it's an hour, it's 40 minutes, ideally 40 minutes to an hour is like the run. This 20 hours thing where you're getting wiped in some bullshit thing is, oh my God, that's a pain. That's
I
a
think I would
pain.
disagree on the exact amount of time. I think that you could push it to like 2 hours, 3 hours without it being like truly hurting the experience. But I do agree with it on like the 20 hours. Like when you get that far into the game and you lose, it does be like the further you get in, the worse it feels.
The more invested you are, yeah.
It's kind of like, so I'm gonna bring like Will brings in Slay Spire, I'll bring in D&D. Like if you're a level 3 character in D&D and your character dies, you're like, oh, that's fun. I'll make a new character now. If you're level 19 character that you've been playing in your campaign for 2 years, 3 years, dies in like a stupid way, like, ooh, that's brutal.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, yeah, the amount of time you invest in something like definitely changes the vibe of how you experience that death.
I tend to agree, Colin. However, there's also another distinction. In that way, that's a good example, and sort of the experience is similar. But there's also, I think, an interesting difference that is useful to look at, which is when you have a Dungeons and Dragons character die, or a tabletop RPG character of any kind die. I think what makes it not a totally awful experience. I mean, it can be, of course, a very rough experience. But what the saving grace is that you are going to get the opportunity to make a new tabletop role-playing game character, and you're going to immediately jump into a gaming experience with brand new 100% whole cloth original content. Whereas with a roguelike game, you are going to have to probably replay some content.
Yeah.
And re-experience it. And that grind to get back to where you were in video games can be very tough. And it's not as tough. That issue is mitigated by roguelikes that do a really good job of randomizing things so that every experience, even early game, is like new and novel. Or in games like you mentioned, Will, that are specifically designed from the ground up to have a quick and like tight game cycle that's like short and set and good. And the part of my personal TOME frustration in my gameplay experience was that grind to get back to where I was. And so my character, I'm double checking my screenshot. It looks like I got to level 8. When I lost that character at level 8, I was pretty bummed out, especially since it was a feel bad death kind of a moment where it's like, I thought the game worked a certain way, and I apparently misunderstood. And
yeah, I feel like you
it was
really
only like a couple hours in, but
you
it was
shouldn't
like,
have been
oh
playing on
no.
permadeath mode. We did a bad job of letting you do that.
Well, I was doing the adventurer mode where you have the set, you have a certain limit and you gain more. As far as I can tell, that's the default.
Yeah.
And I think that system is interesting and good. As to the subject of permadeath games or near permadeath games that are really long, so the opposite of Hades. I think that there's something to be said for that long form gameplay experience and having the drama and the tension of knowing I'm only going to get one shot. You know, I only got one life. There's something to be said for that experience, and some games capture it, and it's really amazing. But it is tricky, and designers have to be careful. And I think that this game was probably designed the way it was, again, because of the age, as we've discussed.
Yeah.
I have a proposed solution for this game specifically. At those markers, those milestones where you get an extra life, maybe add a checkpoint, a save game. Maybe not those exact milestones, but have some kind of milestone save game. I think would be a great mod. Somebody should maybe have that.
I mean, there probably is a mod for that.
Probably.
But
probably
yeah,
a quick save mod.
But does that take away from the tension then? Like,
I think the kickback
I think
to a
it
previous
depends on the
save-
player.
yeah.
Yeah, like the kickback to a previous save still has that like gut-wrenching feeling of like, oh man, I lost like that much progress. Do I really want to start over again? Versus like, okay, now I know what I did wrong for like the past 10 hours. Great. I can go back. I have this safety net. Like it's probably something that varies between different people. So the character history that I have in this game, Colin, I also started off with Odin, the lightning
Very
dwarf
good.
bulwark.
Very good.
And then I cribbed your current D&D character, Lars Gibbon, the cursed halfling, which I think I shot myself in the foot on that one because I believe in
Very
this
big,
game,
hairy feet that were shot.
and because in Tome, I believe halflings rely a lot on the luck stat, and the cursed class deliberately gives you a penalty to that. So I think I was
Oh.
basically playing with one hand behind my
One
my
hobbit
tiny
foot,
torso.
if you will.
And then after that, I played Anakin Skywalker, the cursed hired Cornac human. And I didn't realize at the time I was using like a two-handed sword and I had basically no defense. And I kept wondering, why am I dying all the time? And then eventually I lost all of my lives and I died, picking up a pretty decent shield, but too little too late. And I currently do have the option to save scum it back like 10 levels, but I'm not going to because I'm like, well, it's permadeath and I have like there's so much other stuff to explore in this game. Like I don't really need like the draw for me is not so much like, oh, I have to go and beat the final boss to be like done with it. It's more of like understanding the different classes and systems and things and seeing what like interesting puzzles that I have to solve as a result of that. So the next run after that was a human oozemancer named Ivan Ooze. And I played that one on the easiest possible difficulty with no permadeath. And it like that character class is fun, but that tension that was lacking of like, well, like I can just play as sloppy as I want because there's no permadeath. There's no consequences to me screwing up here. And so after that, I started playing TikTok, the human chronomancer, and whoa, Nelly, is the craziness level turned up to 11. I think if these classes were unlocked earlier, so you could see like, whoa, like this is like something you never see in a game that like you are literally creating like it's like save scum as a video game mechanic where you are going into a quote unquote parallel timeline. You are killing an enemy there, and then you're coming back to your original timeline and deleting them out of existence from the game. It's like, I don't know if I'm describing that right, but your raised
Cool.
eyebrows are like,
I did not get
that's-
to this part of the game.
yeah, like this is a thing that I'm like, this stuff needs to be not quite front and center, but like you maybe have like two of your bog standard fantasy classes and then something weird like the Oozemancer or the Chronomancer, because they're so different. And like I'm wrapping my head around like any one of these new mechanics that comes out. I'm like, what does this even mean? Because like other games like this, where you are like, okay, I'm going to pick the Minotaur class, and all right, I've got a two-handed axe, and I'm walking on these grids, and I'm bumping into stuff. Great, I've seen this 100 times before. Like, I'm not traveling through time in those games. It's like it's turning my brain inside out. I'm like, like it's so interesting and different that this is what draws me to try to like, okay, that character died. Great, I want to try this class of halfling weird looking yeti people that have been tortured by or no, they were tortured by the halflings and kept as slaves for experimentation. I want to try him with a mage class. Let's go. Let's see what happens. And to Andrew, I think your point about like, oh, it's the same grind all over again. A missed opportunity, I think, here is that instead of grinding the same zones that you go through over and over again, if it was a different selection of zones every run, like, oh, in this run,
Absolutely.
I don't have the option to go to the Trollmire because the Spellblaze has blown it up, and that's not even an option in this run. Because
For sure,
I mean,
for sure.
like this game, I think is also specifically designed against anti-grinding, which is something you see in these older traditional roguelikes a lot. Is like potions. There's no potions. Enemies don't respawn, so enemies themselves are almost kind of a conserved resource. And yeah, like there's so much experimentation to go on. Will, I do want to ask you. We had our good buddy Davian right into the program. Hello. And he wanted to get your input because you had mentioned last time about 7 Days to Die and those points of interest. And in this game in Tome, when you're exploring a dungeon, there's maybe a similar idea with vaults, where you come to a door that says you've come across a sealed door. Are you sure you want to open that? And maybe to summarize Davian's email, where do you see like that kind of importance here? And like as the only person here who has beaten the game, so you are our de facto expert. Open the vault or don't open the vault?
Well, you open the vault until you get to level 50 and you just want to beat the fucking game, and then you try and find the exit to get to the next floor as fast as possible and then ignore everything else. That was kind of my strategy. So it was interesting and useful early on, but there's just so many like I was over it. I didn't want to fight another elite. I just wanted, because that's when if I find another elite, what that means I have to do is I have to hit like 5 more hotkeys. And so regular dudes, you just run in there and just, 1 hotkey, 2 hotkeys, 3, but there's more prep required for like anything that would be in one of these tome rooms. And I don't think the tomes are anything like POIs though.
If you're a summoner, you have to pre-summon things for those. Make sure that all your good summons are out so you can like open the door and then yeet yourself away.
Well, I mean, I went with the lightning archmage was nothing like that. There was no, you basically, the only question was, how much shield do I need? And if I need more shield, then in the beginning you have to like activate several shields, and then suddenly you walk in, like I said, with like 7,000 of shield, which I know by the end of the game,
real number? Like
it's basically means that like nothing can touch you. I never had that shield broken essentially by the end game.
Will, am I to understand that you were playing the spellcaster equivalent of the Enterprise, the USS Enterprise?
I was like shield. I felt like saying shields up every time. Like it's just like it.
They're targeting us with lasers. So that is. Yeah, I think, obviously, I mean, you didn't ask me the question, but there's a lot of these games, a lot of modern roguelikes, or even, older roguelikes, their form of randomization is not 100%, procedural. It is a collection, a library of modules, prefabricated rooms and areas that are then shuffled and like put together, like in Enter the Gungeon is a great example. Crypt of the Necrodancer is a great example.
Or even our past episode, Nightmare Reaper.
Nightmare Reaper, of course. Yes. And that is a pretty great solution. And it sounds like Tome does something kind of similar in having this library of vault modules. And you get, the best of both worlds in that you get randomization, and so a unique experience and path for the player to explore. But you also get finely tuned, meaningfully and deliberately designed sections that a designer has gone in and tweaked and refined and made into an enjoyable experience. So you get the randomness, but you also get the crafted experience.
I'm not sure that's exactly what the vaults were.
Yeah,
but I wish they were.
Well, I said they did that a little bit. I guess was my.
Well, the vaults. Are you
they're
sure
single
you open
rooms,
that?
right?
Yeah, like they're basically single rooms. They have some pretty like decently tiered loot in there. You open it up, and it is a monster factory of. If you were in that dungeon at that specific level, you open it up. There's guys in there, maybe like.
Yeah, no, I definitely
like 4 or 5
encountered
levels higher than
these,
you.
but I just I thought perhaps maybe later in the game they are larger than just like a single room.
I think there are some that are larger, because I do remember in my previous playthrough encountering something like like this. I'm like, yeah, of course I want to open this thing. And then it being kind of like a long hallway and then like some branching segments off of it, be like, oh, okay. And then just getting like surrounded by like 2 tile tall ice giants who are just hurtling boulders at me until I die.
Yeah, but the tutorial told you not to get surrounded.
Oh, you're
Specifically said
right.
that. That's a
Classic
shame. That's
mistake.
a shame. Classic. It's true. It's true. Say, I have a with regards to the controls. I just wanted to mention that I do, again, I can conceptualize of this idea of like really getting into the game and having your key bindings down and having both hands on the keyboard and just going away, doing this gameplay loop. You've got, your build in mind, you know what to do, you've memorized all the buttons. I started to get that feeling with my level 8 character. Like I was using the mouse and keyboard, but like, I knew the exact combination. I had my rotation down on the action bar. And that rhythm was getting to feel quite nice around the time I got killed. So like, again, I can understand and logically process how this game is fun once you get into it, and for certain types of players.
Yeah. There's there's a lot of stuff in this game. Maybe I should re-edit this part to the start of the podcast, but let's see. We talked about like there's a bunch of classes. There's like 12 overarching themes of character classes. There's 37 of them in total plus DLCs. You have 16 different races. There's from your Diablo style skills that you can pick from, there are 1,505 unique versions of those.
Wow.
So there's quite a lot. There's all sorts of like weird resources also. So instead of like your standard action RPG of like you have your life bar on the right and your mana bar on the left and have fun.
They're being held up by a devil and angel respectively.
Yeah, exactly. My Anakin Skywalker cursed human, I had to keep my hate meter filled at all times in order to get
the Anakin
on brand.
hate meter combo matic is
you had
great.
to keep the hate high and the high
Let the
ground
hate
low.
flow through you.
Yeah, and this is interesting because it creates this decision element against auto explore, because when you're walking around and you're not killing all of the women and children, I killed them all, you're losing hate. And this is very important for Anakin. He must be hateful at all times. So whenever you kill an enemy, you get more hate. And whenever you're walking around, you're losing hate. And if you're at maximum hate, you get a bunch of these great bonuses associated with it. So I was walking around thinking like, okay, I can't auto explore, but I know that this stage that I'm in, the boss at this stage is always at the bottom of the screen or like this dungeon. And so I basically beelined to like either follow like the critical path of the level to get down there and just making sure I was like constantly bashing monsters the whole time to keep my hate meter up, get to the boss, aha, I've got you now, and then just hate sliced him in half, no problem. There's other, and I think I briefly talked about it, but like the Chronomancer class, if Tenet was a video game, like you have it, one of the subclasses, you have a resource called Paradox, and so writers write into the podcast when I'm getting this wrong, but I believe it works this way, where you basically set like your level caps to how much paradox power you have, and you can define like how powerful do you want to be. And the risk reward here is that the more spells you use, the more your paradox meter increases. And if it goes beyond a certain threshold for your level, you can't control paradox anymore. And so you start like, I want to click this button to use this spell. Well, you've like created a problem in the space-time continuum if you teleported like 5 spaces to the right. And like, okay, well, I would like to put my shield up. Oh, you've created a rift in the space-time continuum, and you've summoned in like 5 allied dwarves to your side from a parallel dimension who are very, like, the description is like they are very confused as to where they are right now. And so stuff like that is like very there's another race I haven't tested out yet that has like you're supposed to be like constantly balancing out like light and dark magic constantly. And like these are all super creative things that you don't see in other like boring fantasy grid-based ASCII art grid bumpers as they are. Like it's so creative and interesting that Like that's the draw for me here is like all this stuff, but also how unique and different it is.
I think that's great. I agree with you on that. I think they have a lot of interesting classes, and I noticed that just in playing the several that I did, that there was definitely a different feel to each of them, and it was interesting to try and discover it. And I'm sure there's within each class, there's probably many different ways of choosing talents to even like bring out certain aspects of it. So I think that's all makes sense. If only the game was like if it was if the Eastern Island didn't exist, if it was just that ended in Dredfell, then we're talking about like maybe like it's like 8 to 10 hours. I think actually maybe it down to 5 at the like. Then you get an interesting playthrough. By the time you get to 25 anyways or so, you like your build's basically complete. And so just like just cut the game in half. Less is more here, I think. And then you could explore all these more interesting aspects of the game, which is like all the different types of characters and yeah, because if it's 20 hours to beat it and you have how many different characters and you want me to play through all the characters, it's just I guess that's why the average time is 100 and how many hours? 129 is what
what was my careful lawyering of the phrase? Yeah, like your average player of this game has 128.92 hours in it.
Yeah.
But
your
what
kind of is that actually the best part?
That's the median. The 90th the 90th percentile of people who play this game have 1,088 hours in it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I could absolutely see a slightly different version of Will that just is like instead of playing Slay the Spire on his monitor with TNG on the other monitor while he's going to bed, he could just be playing this and he gets an hour a night in for 3 years in a row. Can we talk about the music?
I kind of like the music in this game. am I the outlier here?
Incorrect. It's upsettingly bad.
What? No.
It's really, really repetitive. And also the sound effects are in villages are weird. And there's a little dog that barks in the background.
And a glass shatters.
Incredibly annoying.
Let's not forget the hawk.
Oh, the hawk.
That hawk. Oh man, that hawk sent me. It's like, folks, we get the sprite coming in. It's moving at the wrong angle. Like it doesn't even make sense. And it has a little shadow being cast on the ground. It's really cute. And then, ooh boy, I was immersed. Let me tell you.
It was actually in there. I just heard the sound effect. I didn't actually see it.
Oh, it's there. Oh, I saw it twice. It was awesome.
Yeah.
And both times I was reminded of there was a Counter-Strike 1.6 level that was like I think it was a custom map, but it was very professionally done. And there was a section where it was like a Grand Canyon type of a layout, and above the canyon you could see a bird flying around, and the bird was just a texture that was just sort of floating around on a preset track, and it reminded me of that, and I was oh so delighted. And then I got distracted from the game for like a half hour and went and played Counter-Strike 1.6, which was a delight. And then I had to go back
about
to
the
this.
same level of
no, sorry, that just speaks to my personal, personal taste in video games.
The point about the music being repetitive is true, because when I was going and trying to find music selections to play this episode out with, I'm like, I think I had a pretty good time with the music. And then I found the soundtrack posted up on YouTube, and they're all like a minute long, and I'm like,
yikes.
like.
Actually, you're right. I won't say that the music is bad, but it plays. They're short and they loop really quickly.
Which wouldn't be a problem if you weren't spending more than like 5 minutes in like a whole dungeon, but you could probably spend like a half hour in each dungeon if you're like making sure to be very tactical and thoughtful about your play. And then like if it's the same.
Well, I'm spending 5 minutes comparing items, trying to use the very, very bad item comparison thing, and it's playing in the background. And I'm getting frustrated because I'm frustrated at comparing the items because I just want them the side by side, and then the music is just repeating in the background, and it's. And then that dog is barking because we're in like some weird city, and it's just in the background. But it's so quiet that you're like, it took me a second, like, to realize that it was part of the game. I thought there was just a dog barking in my apartment because it's just like this soft, weird, like muffled dog bark sound in the background of the one like elf village or something.
So you're saying you were totally immersed in this game, is what you were saying?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Correct.
Full immersion. Like I may have well been wearing the Apple VR headset in the world of Maj'Eyal.
Would you be doing that with the old RPG tile set or the standard graphics?
I mean, I only played with whatever the game came with. I didn't find the graphics to be that bad.
All
Like-
right, so folks, I'd like to start. This is a wonderful topic to bring up. But first, real quick, hey, you know, they didn't have a whole dang sound department working on this thing. You know, we should maybe cut them some slack. That being said, yeah, the music is.
I'm
very
on the Will
repetitive,
team. I don't care if you're a single person developing.
Oh, here
it.
comes the cock. Whoa, I misspoke
Whoa.
completely.
Family show
Here
here.
comes the hawk.
This podcast is
brother.
rated E for educational.
Sometimes a hawk is just a hawk, but in this case, it's a cock hawk. All right, folks, I have a screenshot. It's coming at you of this beautiful piece of artwork, which is relatively charming. There are a few pieces of art that are kind of charming. Generally, I like the menus and the UI kind of like well enough, I would say.
Yeah, I would say like the art, like the
All right, on the Discord, check that out. Woo.
Oh, I see. It's a screenshot of the hawk. Yes. Yes. very
Yeah,
good.
I have the game open right now, and I just got
So
so
likely.
excited that I was going to be able to capture
That
for y'all.
building is absolutely hideous. Do you see that building, by the
Boy.
way? I'm just it's in the screen. Like, you just reminded me, like, that was like upsettingly bad to see buildings like with that design.
See,
You know,
I don't care. I don't care at all.
Yeah.
Like it gets the point across. Like this just feels like it's theater of the mind in many ways. Like I'm not when
A
I'm
mind
thinking
like
about-
that of the main character from Nightmare Reaper, our last game, a addled
Yeah.
person in need of assistance in crisis. No, sorry, please continue.
Like I'm pretty good at imagining things. Like I read books. The graphics
Ooh,
of books
he's a
are
big
really
book
bad.
Whoa!
Like these are better graphics than a book.
I don't think that they are better graphics than the human mind, the most sophisticated and impressive computer in existence.
Andrew,
I
that's
don't
why you
think
played
that's-
on ASCII mode exclusively, right?
Is there an
This
ASCII
just
mode?
Reminds me
There
of
is,
like
yeah.
being like our childhood. Like you're looking at the graphics and you're like, okay, this is not the thing that's happening. This is a representation of things, and my mind is filling in the actual action that's occurring.
I think that we are discussing a pretty subjective thing.
Yeah.
But I think there's it would not be outrageous to say this game is objectively ugly.
Okay,
I
fair.
think something that softened my opinion on it a bit was when I discovered that it was officially launched in 2012. And so I was like, all right, well, let me put myself on a 2012 mindset. And I'm like, I guess
2010 even.
I wouldn't have thrown up immediately upon seeing this. Like if it was on like a bubbly like CRT screen. I don't know why you'd have a CRT screen, but like an old timey
2012 isn't that
low
long
res.
ago.
I mean, what
We
was the
had
average
invented
monitor
actual
like?
screens by then.
I guess that's true. I had a 20 like I had a 24-inch monitor by that
Like,
time,
That
but I
was
don't think
Obama's
the
second
resolution was
term.
especially high. Anyway, I gave it a little bit more. Folks, listen, folks at home. The bottom line, ultimately, I think the issue with this game for me visually is that it is a very sort of like incoherent and a graphic style that lacks cohesion.
No. It has lots of cohesion. This is every single sprite, every single property of this entire game could fit into a 14-year-old's fantasy art portfolio. I mean, we're talking amateur grade, like it all fits into that sort of like level, right?
I think I agree, but maybe not quite. Like it's this is the art style here is that Italian Jesus repainting failure that happened, where like it is bad, but it has heart. It is heart bad, not boring bad. And an example of boring bad is the Steam release of Ancient Domains of Mystery that I linked to, where
yes.
like the art there like is functional. It's clear, you can see what's happening. That's fine. But all the characters look like, you know, chibi like mobile art with like the cartoonishly like big head and smaller bodies, and like it's just like boring bad art to me. Like that is worse than like bad art, which is what we have here. Because this like the art here I think is bad, but it's like it's entertainingly bad.
I feel like it's not focused on being good, which is fine. It's placeholder for use your imagination to imagine a vibrant magical world that is happening in the text and the descriptions of how things are
That
happening.
feels like an extra like hurdle almost for the player. Like you need to overcome these visuals to
Mhm.
to
I mean, would
force
you
your
like
brain
it?
into
Okay,
making
here's
something better.
this is a traditional roguelike.
Sure.
Would you like it better if it were ASCII art?
No.
Maybe.
Would you
I
like it better? Like,
legitimately am not
let's assume
sure.
that there's some way to make it so that, like, my criticism of ASCII is generally it's hard for me to grok what is happening. I can't
Great
look at
point.
it and like quickly know where things are or what things are. If
Like,
you
is this
could,
lowercase m a mine or is it a minotaur?
right, exactly. If you could figure that out quickly, but other than that, it was representational, would that make this better or worse?
Better.
I would
Better
I
than
would
ASCII,
point
I mean.
to
Well, no,
Cogmind.
better than the current graphics.
I would say Cogmind is a good example of having extremely simplistic art, but it is presented in a stylized and engaging way.
Yeah.
Um, but it's a great question. Straight up ASCII, probably not. But if it was some kind of really rudimentary graphics that were clear and representational, as you said, I think that'd be great. But I also kind of agree. I don't know. I'm torn on this.
I think the art
overreacted when I first opened it,
I think
and
the
over the
art
course of yeah.
like rightfully is going to push a lot of people away when they come to the Steam trailer page and being like, "Whoa, this is not for me." Uh, and I think if there was a mod pack or something that just took like the art as or like the base tiles as they were and just AI upscaled them using some theme or something like Greg
Yeah.
Rotowski, Chronomancer, what have you, then like that I think is something that could be more palatable to the general gaming audience. Obviously, if someone is Google searching for Tales of Maj'Eyal, they're probably not in the same category of people who are, have their only other experience is Binding of Isaac or Slay the Spire or something.
Great point. Great point. And I think at the end of the day, it's fun to kind of goof on this artwork, especially some of the animals. Ooh, boy. I'm copy pasting the fox for everyone's enjoyment here.
The fox was fine.
The fox was
I'll take a look at
fine.
it. I'm pretty sure I felt
but
like the fox was totally acceptable.
At the end of the
I
day,
knew it was a
Colin,
fox.
you're totally right. You can look at the graphics and you understand what's going on, and that is arguably the most important. Look at that guy. Is he a
That's
living
gorgeous.
fox or is he
It does
is he
have his little
roadkill?
tongue blepping out.
that is a taxidermied fox if I've ever seen
Now,
one in
on
a
the
tile.
other end of the spectrum, we've got one of my favorite sprites, which is
Gotta be a dragon
the
or a worm.
halfling. What is this? The United
Right.
Kingdom's halfling patrol, and we just have like three happy guys that look like sort of a colorized, upscaled version of like the Chad beta meme kind
Those
of
are
almost.
equally bad. Those are all very much
They're
very
bad, but
cohesive.
they illustrate the point that Scott pointed out that the art is maybe not technical. It lacks technical excellence, but it certainly has heart.
It's like those medieval paintings that people did before they like it's like a cat with just like a human face on it because they didn't understand what a cat face was.
Indeed.
Like it's like one step between that and like the bad Jesus like painting. In that, like, again, if this game like took that turn of like, okay, well, the cohesive art style we're gonna do is that like bad Bayou tapestry comedic effect, then like yeah, lean into that more. Like that could be interesting, but like there's so much stuff going on that yeah, like I will say the times that I've gotten to the Ice Mountain volcano stage, even with the default graphics, like the ice giants there, they just look like that looks like something legitimately terrifying. And the like if I
Ooh.
turned around a corner and I saw even just like that base tile art of like a two tile tall ice giant throwing a boulder at me, legit like I've opened those doors, I've seen like the vaults filled with them, legitimate
Nope.
fear moment. And like the base art for like some of the dragons, I think like some like it's pretty good. It's just inconsistent and it does not put its best foot forward at the beginning where like your standard dwarf art, your standard human art, your standard elf art is bad. And like if like casual gamers are going from like your mid roguelite game with all of, like these like fancy graphics like coming from Dead Cells to this, like of course people are gonna like spoon their eyeballs out.
which you probably could do in this game because you can target yourself with attacks. And as we learned, there are like 1,000 different unique Diablo style abilities. I just want to say real quick, yeah, so taste in game art, super subjective, going to vary from person to person. What's an objective problem with this art is does not play well. This game does not play well in my experience with like modern resolutions. At modern resolution, it's way too big. I can't read anything. Also, the graphics are way too tiny. I found that if I set it to a really low resolution, it sort of quote unquote upscaled or zoomed in the screen in such a way that like the sprites weren't horribly distorted. But then my hotbar disappeared. And like I played for the first 30 minutes having the exact experience, Will, that you had, where it's like, why does the hotbar start at, the number 0? Where's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? And that's because those numbers exist 6 inches off of my monitor at the moment.
I didn't have any of these problems that you guys had. It just
half of us had problems.
It is kind of an interesting problem where like these games are so classically designed. They're not really designed with like modern systems in mind to some extent. I will say to this game's defense, it did play very well natively on the Steam Deck, which you would think that like,
wow.
Yeah,
cool.
like a platform that you would think that like would not have anything to do with this style of game. Like you can't like playing Cogmind on the Steam Deck may be possible with an upcoming update in the future. We'll see. I'll report back. But like it played out of the box like very well, and being able to install Steam Workshop mods, very streamlined and intuitive. And like I played almost all of my 20 hours this past couple weeks, like almost entirely on the Steam Deck. And I think like it worked really well for that. Just vegging out on the couch, turn at a time, watching TV, put on an episode of Veep, and then just like in between laughs, like move your character around a little bit. Works perfectly.
Wow. That is swell. And not unlike Last Spell, I think this would be, for the right player, a really great airplane game.
I was just playing it on the airplane this morning as I was coming back to the Seattle area. There you go. You put in the airplane mode. Yeah, like it works very well. And
would you like a Pepsi or orange juice, sir? And you're like, my paradox level, it's too high. Leave me alone.
And then she splashes you with time juice and you warp onto the wing of the plane. Or where the wing of the plane will be by the time you fall down out of the sky.
Holy moly. I got to get this mod that unlocks all the classes.
I mean, I just posted this other image to the chat here. Did any of you get to the dating part of the game?
Excuse me?
What?
Excuse me?
Oh yeah, no. This is why I wanted to like add this extra. Like this is just like, oh my god, you could definitely tell it's the 14-year-old essentially mindset who not only made the art, but they're also like, oh man, I want this game to have like I want to be able to date someone in it. So there's this like whole mission dedicated to this like dating this girl essentially, and there's like a kissing that you do, and they have this beach scene, and I've dropped this image in the chat here. But like there's a woman in a bikini, like this little pixelized bikini woman that you're like protecting on the beach. And
meanwhile, your character's in full armor.
Like the beach umbrella.
Why is there a woman in a bikini? And you could barely tell really because of the pixels, but like, oh my god.
Well, I learned that as a goof in the character creation, you can customize your character's appearance, and you can pick a actually this speaks to an issue in the game. In the character creation, I realize it's an old game, so it wasn't really in vogue being done, but the fact that there's in the character creation only binary options are disappointing. And by binary, I'm referring to the gender binary options, that there's only male and female, but also the binary of picking bikini or mankini. Those are two options in the character customization. One's like the pink bikini that we're seeing on screen, and the other is like a potato sack, basically. But you can apparently, as a goof, they put those in there, you can play the whole game in a swimsuit. And if you beat the game in the swimsuit, you get like an extra achievement, which I'm sure Will be angling for this coming 2-week period, and he'll talk about it on that next episode.
Yeah, I think this is maybe the risk you run with an open source game is maybe, I don't know if we can attribute this to the lead dev, but someone's got to approve it for those pull requests. So yeah, I think like it's doubly hilarious because the art is so.
I did not realize there was a beach blanket bingo quest. I kept running into the, please escort me, I'm lost in the troll woods. But I did not encounter the beach extravaganza surf party. That is most impressive. Hey, I got a question for y'all. Or I have a proposal. My proposal for fixing the save system, not the best. But here's my proposal for fixing your mindset about this artwork. So I'd like to bring everyone's attention to the main menu screen that I'm sure you're all familiar with. You've got sort of in the middle, standing in this hallway in this dungeon, our adventurer. How would you describe the class of this adventurer, Colin? You know who I'm talking about.
Are you talking about the static splash screen?
The static splash screen. Yeah, he's got a wizard hat on. He's like multi-classing it up. Looks pretty heroic. Looks pretty cool.
I think the art for that,
like an adventurer.
Yeah, I think the art for that is pretty cool because like it evokes mystery. Like you're going. I think this is probably the best splash art for the game.
It sets the tone. I agree. Yeah. I agree overall, but there's a few details that I think are a little bit wonky, and this will get to my solution for the visuals. This guy, so he's got a sword, he's got a lantern, he's got some boots. He's wearing for no reason really a witch's hat. In the foreground, we see some enemies. A tiny little Jawa, a hooded figure with two knives and little red eyes. Looks like a little animatronic goofball. A random snake for some reason in the foreground. A mummy.
You encounter snakes, yeah.
So basically looking at this image, is there any reason for anybody looking at it to not believe that the setting of Tales of Maj'Eyal is in fact a spirit Halloween? So if you think of the whole game existing in a spirit Halloween verse, I think that answers a lot of questions about the oddness in the visual style. That is all. Thank you.
That would explain all of the Anakin Skywalker costumes,
That's true.
Traveling, and the bad Jesus painting things that you run into.
Indeed. So I'm glad that yes, there is artwork to be like, hey, you're looking at an abstraction in the actual gameplay, but like let's not forget this is the world. This is the reality of what's going on being represented.
You know what? I think I just identified what is wrong about all the art. Like just of all the people at it, anyways. It's just that the arms are too short. They if you have your hand extended, it should extend to the middle of your thigh. And these people are all just like their arms are just a little too short, and it looks a bit odd.
Could be, and I'm sure this artist has just gotten leaps and bounds better than this, and I'm sure if given an opportunity to do a remaster, it'd be swell.
Or they don't care, and that's fine too.
That's also fine. Absolutely.
Should we do some ranking, boys?
Is it TOME for rankings?
Oh my god. I've been calling it all week the tomes of Taj Mahal. That's how I remember it. Because I don't know, something about
Tomes Mahal.
Yeah. Maj'Eyal? What the heck is that?
That's the I think that's the planet that you're on, and Ayal is the continent.
It's got the same letters as Middle Earth.
Yeah, exactly.
It has, there's a fun factoid history about this game, like changing its branding at the last second to avoid cease and desist letters from the Tolkien estate. But yeah, I think it's done better by branching out its own thing, because I don't think Chronomancers really existed in the Silmarillion. But
well, we don't know what the Blue Wizards did, so they could have been the Chronomancers.
There you go.
I'll start off.
Take it away, sir.
I'm gonna give this game a 7.5. I think it was pretty good. I liked it. I think it was I think it shows off a lot of the where the appeal of a roguelike game can come from. Like I can see very, very much why roguelikes were popular well before graphics got good. Like you could have played and made most of this game a long time ago.
Yeah.
Most of the stuff, the graphics are not important to the gameplay. You don't need to have a strong computer to run it. I mean, there's some visual effects in there that add a little bit, but the dungeon exploring bit, the moving around, the complex systems interacting with each other and exploration and stuff, it's all there. And I had a pretty good time playing it. I definitely have some criticisms on how some of the user interfaces and some of the peripheral things work, but overall I thought it was a pretty fun game. And I think if someone was asking me, I want to play a traditional roguelike, this is probably the one that I would recommend to them now. I think Cogmind is a better game, but this is a more intro friendly in terms of like you want to experience the genre and you want the fantasy aspect of it. Like this really does have, I mean, it has the start stuff, and then if you want to get deeper into it, it's got all the weird stuff later in it too.
For sure, for sure. All right, so I've given lots of disclaimers throughout this whole episode. I'll give one last final one, which is to say, when we're given these ratings, I mean, the how useful it is just comes down to, on a player by player basis. If you are like me and you tend to like twitchier games, this review is applicable. Originally I gave it like a 5, and then over the course of our conversation, I realized, well, 5 out of 10 makes you think, oh, this game's average. It's definitely not average. It's above average, certainly. And I think I can, again, understand why people like it. All the stuff that Scott's describing, Colin, your experiences, Will, your experiences, however troubled they were at times, illustrate to me that, hey, this game has a lot of depth and interest. And previously I said that I think it is an achievement, and I stand by that statement, that assessment. So yeah, 5.5, which unfortunately, puts it in like my bottom 4 of the games that I've reviewed with you fine folks. Yeah, I'm glad that I played it ultimately. I said that those 6 hours were not especially enjoyable, but I'm glad to have played Tome.
It's better than the 0.1 that you gave Cataclysm Dark Days.
Well, the only reason I gave it a 0.1 was so like I could get it to like work in the ranking system, and that was the quickest way to like. Well, I want to make sure it's at the bottom. 0.1.
I'm pretty tempted to go back and give it a similar rating just out of spite at this point.
and that raises, that's pretty bad.
And that raises a great point. Like here we have a game that, for all its UI problems, is a lot better and does also have mouse, and like it avoids a lot of the pitfalls of Cataclysm while also having, I would argue, more interesting and more varied content.
Cool. I guess I'm gonna take it away here with my review. So as everyone obviously knows, because I've said this so many times, 6 is my recommend threshold, right? If it's a 6 or above. I'm gonna go with a 6.5 here.
Woo, we did it! Mission accomplished.
Boom.
Release the balloons.
I mean, like, this is to say, like, it's interesting. Don't beat the game. Like, be exposed to it. And I think that's the best thing you do for yourself. Expose yourself to it. There are some weirdos out there who get really into this, like the person who wrote in. Thank you for writing in. But like, it's, but like, I can understand like how someone could get sucked in. But like, you should just tell. Are you that kind of person? For me, no. And I just want to reiterate, traditional roguelikes cannot be fun.
Oh,
they can't be fun. It's not actually possible, and
it can be compelling enough to make you play 60 hours.
Well, this was a spiteful sort of nothing. Like I said, I've already given the reason for that, and I never intend to open this game again unless maybe the airport or the air flight situation might make more sense. Maybe I played Civ 5 though or something like that. But anyways, yeah, so 6.5. If only it wasn't a roguelike. It was doomed from the start.
But it passed the threshold.
It did. There's enough in there where, test it out.
All right. I think I'm going to bring us home here with, I'm going to give this game a 9 because yeah, I think this game, I didn't really like bounce off of at the beginning. I just kind of was like, I don't know, like what is here to grab me yet. And I think that like the more I've kind of delved into it, the more I've been exposed to the very helpful Discord community that provides lots of good strategy insight. The website itself reminds me a lot of like the Halo 2 era of like linking your account to the thing, and you can see like all of your stats and stuff on the main page and see where like your character's like ranking is and all that stuff. Like the community for this game, despite the game being kind of long in the tooth, feels very alive and very refreshing to engage with, which is a big plus. I think we kind of talked about a lot of the things that are anchor points to this, like the UI not having an okay or an accept button a lot of the time is sort of baffling. Being able to like compare gear very easily, yeah, is something that more modern action RPGs do in a much more succinct fashion. I think there's like a bottomless pit of mods that you can add on to quote fix those problems, but should they need fixing? Um, I think I have this is probably my best dollar to hour engagement value for any of the roguelike games that I have, where I've put like 40-ish hours into a game that I bought for $2. But I think the quality here is much better than $2. I think there's a lot of interesting variety, not just from the character classes, but basically from all of the levels that aren't the starting one, like the sandworm pit where you're having to like chase sandworms as like the level is collapsing around you and make sure you don't get caught in like a bunch of sand and suffocate. Like cool idea. These are things that if like I see a lot of parallels between like Elden Ring and Souls-like games and this, but like this being much more in the rogue sphere, where like, yeah, you're free to go and explore any zone that you want, but you're gonna get bludgeoned to death by a skeleton in one hit, so good luck. I think, yeah, like there's like picking up items automatically, not having to worry about food, not having to worry about grinding monsters, things that you see in a lot of other traditional roguelikes that are just a chore and I hate and like are antithetical to good game design. I think Dark God has done a very good job in circumventing those and getting right to the fun factor of just you go in, you blow stuff up with spells, you die, great, try something new. I think that flow works very well. So a 9 for me. That's going to put it aggregate, despite my 9, at our new number 18 game, just behind Griftlands and just ahead of Streets of Rogue out of the 40 games that we've talked about thus far. And if you've made it this far in the episode, you're probably thinking, okay, what are some games that are like Tome but different? And I think there's two that jump out immediately. I mentioned Ancient Domains of Mystery. That has all the stuff that I don't like about traditional roguelikes with food meters and using scrolls and spell management. I've played that. It's not for me.
But
Dungeon
it could
crawl
be for you.
stones. Hmm?
But it could be for you, the
Yes, it could
listener.
be for you, gentle listener. So give it a look see and see if it jibes with you. If you thought Tome had too advanced of graphics, there's always Dungeon Crawl Stone Soup for you, where there's no animations as far as I can tell. It is very much you are just in a single ass dungeon. You are crawling it. There's probably some stone soup around. Similar open source game wackiness, but it's very much more, Andrew, like you were saying, of like getting into that like almost shell scripting terminal keyboard command of just like use a keyboard command for everything, and you're just like on turbo mode the whole time. Again, I think these two aren't games for us for this podcast specifically for us four, but I know a lot of people will probably be tuning in. Oh, they're talking about Tome. They're going to talk about Dungeon Crawl, right? Probably not. But some games that I think are probably more our vibe, different graphical aesthetics, maybe a little bit more focused and coherent in their game design. There's a game called Dungeon Mans, which is it's a similar vibe of Tome, maybe a little more constrained in its craziness. But it's got that kind of like Dungeons of Dreadmore comedic effect going on, open world, and every time that you die, it's like, congrats, you died, and then you are leveling up your Dungeon Academy starting town as you go. Recently released Moon Ring has a very interesting visual aesthetic to it, free to play, developed by I think a guy who left Bungie question mark. But that has gotten some really good reviews of like being kind of something that splits the difference between a roguelike and like an Ultima game, if that makes sense. And yeah, I think that like in terms of solid modern UI development in a traditional roguelike space, Moonring is something that does it very well. Open world insanity game Elona, Elona. If you can think about it, you can do it in that one. And I think a for sure stay tuned and a half, possibly 1.0ing this year, is Caves of Cud, which I think is like the sci-fi equivalent of this. But maybe when we get to it, the menu system will be a little less baffling than it actually is. But give those games a look-see. We talk a little bit about Cogmine as more of kind of like a focused single-player experience. But yeah, I think like we have some in the pipe coming up too that I think will test our hypotheses about what we liked and didn't like about this game coming down the road. So stay tuned for some of those. Yeah, I think as we wind down here, if you want to write in with your thoughts about Tome Vaults, you can send those emails into grogpodzone@gmail.com. You can see all of the tenant posting I've been doing about Chronomancers at grogpod@gamedev.place on Mastodon, and you can see our website that has all this nonsense on it with data and our spreadsheets and all that exciting thing at grogpod.zone. Our next episode is a listener requested episode, and I think they've thrown a diplomatic bone to Colin and Will this time with the roguelike city builder Against the Storm. Everyone is frantically Googling now. What is this?
I mean,
I've told you guys about it a dozen
I'm
times.
already on the Steam page.
This is
Oh yeah, right.
yeah, I've played about 10 hours of this, and I this is a Civ and Factorio player's dream for roguiness.
I almost bought it, and then I was like, well, we're just going to be playing this eventually on the podcast, so I'll wait until we do it.
Yeah. So the listeners, yeah, thanks for suggesting this to us. Again, if you want to request a show for us to talk about, send us an email, grogpodzone@gmail.com, or just, put it down below. Or, like, you're listening to this, down below means anywhere. Just tell us what game you want us to play, and then we'll get to it eventually. But yeah, our episode upcoming. I think Will probably already has 300 hours in it since I just said Against the Storm. But yeah, that's gonna put the curtains on Tome here, and well, I guess
say goodbye.
It is Tome to say goodbye, and what better way to say goodbye than having the curtain of this episode, of this gray rain curtain of this world, rolling back on this podcast episode, and all of the audio that you're listening to has turned to silver glass, and then you see it, Colin. See what, Gandalf?
What is it, Gandalf?
You see white shores and beyond, a far green country under a swift sunrise for the next podcast episode.